Have you ever felt like your children don't respect you the way they used to? Maybe they dismiss your advice, ignore your calls, or make decisions without considering your feelings. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know something important. You are not alone. Many parents over 60 experience this painful shift in their relationships with their adult children. But here's the good news: you can turn things around. In this video, we're going to talk about 6 powerful ways to regain respect from your children. Not by demanding it, but by making subtle, strategic shifts in how you communicate and carry yourself. These aren't tricks or mind games. They're real, practical strategies that have helped thousands of parents rebuild stronger, more respectful relationships with their adult kids. So, let's get started with the first 2 strategies, because sometimes the smallest changes make the biggest difference. 1. Stop chasing their approval. One of the hardest realizations as a parent is that your children don't need you the same way they once did, and when they pull away, it's natural to try harder, calling more, offering unsolicited advice, or even bending over backward to stay involved in their lives. But here's the truth: the more you chase, the less they value you. Think about it. When someone is always available, always accommodating, always trying to please, do we respect them more? Or do we start taking them for granted? Your children are no different. If you've been the one always initiating contact, always adjusting to their schedule, or always biting your tongue to keep the peace, it's time to shift the dynamic. Instead of chasing their attention, focus on your own life. Pursue hobbies, build friendships, and create a routine that excites you. When your children see that you're not sitting around waiting for them, something interesting happens. They start wondering what you're up to. And that curiosity, that's the first step toward renewed respect. 2nd, set boundaries without guilt. Many of us were raised to believe that being a good parent means always being there, always saying yes and never rocking the boat. But here's the problem. If you never say no, your yes loses its value. Let me ask you this: have you ever lent money repeatedly even when it strained you? Babysit grandkids at the last minute even when exhausted? Stayed silent when your child spoke to you disrespectfully? If so, you're not alone. But here's the hard truth: people treat us the way we allow them to. That includes our children. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you love them less. It means you love yourself enough to say, "This is what I will and won't accept." For example, "I'd love to help with the kids, but I need a day's notice." "I'm happy to give advice if you ask, but I won't keep offering if it's ignored." "I won't continue this conversation if you raise your voice at me." At first, they might push back. They might even act offended, but stand firm. Respect isn't given, it's earned. And sometimes the way to earn it is to stop giving so much of yourself away. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What if they get angry? What if they pull away even more? That's a valid fear. But here's the thing: people don't respect doormats. They respect those who respect themselves. In the next part of this video, we'll dive into 2 more powerful strategies, including how to communicate in a way that commands respect without arguments. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. In part 1, we talked about stopping the chase for approval and setting firm boundaries. 2 crucial steps in rebuilding respect with your adult children. Now let's move into the next 2 strategies, which focus on how you communicate and the energy you bring into your relationships. These aren't about manipulation or playing games. They're about shifting small but powerful behaviors that over time change how your children see and treat you. 3. Speak less, listen more. The power of silence. One of the most common mistakes parents make when they feel disrespected is talking more, explaining, justifying, or even pleading for understanding. But here's the counterintuitive truth: the more you talk, the less they hear. Think about it. When someone lectures you, do you lean in or tune out? Your children are no different. If every conversation turns into advice-giving, reminders, or even unintentionally guilt trips, they'll start avoiding conversations altogether. Instead, try this. Become a master listener. When they share something, resist the urge to jump in with solutions. Just say, "That sounds tough. How are you handling it?" If they make a decision you disagree with, instead of criticizing, ask, "What made you choose that?" When tensions rise, pause. Silence makes people uncomfortable, and often they'll fill it by reconsidering their tone. This doesn't mean you never speak your mind, it means you choose your moments wisely. When you do speak, make it brief, clear, and without apology. For example, "I disagree, but it's your decision. That comment hurt my feelings." Then stop talking, let them respond. By speaking less, your words carry more weight. And when your children realize you're not just waiting for your turn to talk, they'll start listening to you in a whole new way. 4. Stop the parenting voice. Talk to them like adults. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Your tone might be triggering their disrespect without you even realizing it. Even if you don't mean to, you might still be using the same tone you did when they were 15. You should really. Why don't you just? When are you going to? That tone, even when well-intentioned, sends a subconscious message. I still see you as a child. And how do children rebel? By pushing back, dismissing, or outright ignoring. The fix? Talk to them like you would a respected friend. Swap. You should save more money. I read about this retirement strategy. Interesting stuff. Instead of, when are you visiting? Try, I'd love to see you. What's a good time for you? If they complain about work, resist saying, I told you that job was bad. Try, sounds frustrating. What's your next move? This small shift in language removes the power struggle. It says, I respect your adulthood, which makes them far more likely to respect you in return. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. What if I try these things and they still act disrespectful? That's where strategy number 5 comes in, which we'll cover in part 3. It's the most counterintuitive one yet, and it's often the game changer. But for now, try this. Pick one conversation this week where you will listen more than you speak, and use an adult-to-adult tone. Notice what happens. Sometimes the smallest changes create the biggest shifts. We've covered a lot so far, from stepping back to let your children miss you, to setting boundaries, mastering the power of silence, and dropping the parenting tone. These strategies work because they reset the dynamic without arguments or guilt trips. Now let's dive into the final 2 strategies, including the most counterintuitive but most effective way to regain respect when nothing else seems to work. 5. Let them experience the consequences. This one's tough, but it's powerful. As parents, we're wired to protect our children, even when they're 40 years old. But when we constantly shield them from the consequences of their actions or their disrespect, we rob them of the chance to realize your value. Here's what this looks like in practice. If they forget your birthday after you've always made theirs special, don't remind them. Let them notice. If they rush off the phone every time you call, wait for them to reach out next. If they dismiss your advice and later face problems, resist the "I told you so." Just say, "That's rough. How will you handle it?" This isn't about punishment. It's about allowing natural consequences to teach what words can't. When they experience life without your constant support or your silent tolerance of disrespect, they start to recalibrate how they treat you. 6. Become unshakably secure in your worth. Here's the hard truth. We teach people how to treat us by what we tolerate. If you've been feeling disrespected for a while, it's likely because somewhere along the way, you allowed it. Not because you wanted to, but because you feared losing the relationship. The ultimate key to earning respect? Stop needing it so desperately. That might sound strange, but think about it. The person who begs for kindness often gets ignored. The person who expects dignity and acts accordingly often receives it. So how do you build this unshakable security? Invest in your own life. Pursue passions, friendships, and goals outside of your role as a parent. Refuse to compete for their attention. If they take you for granted, focus on people who don't. Silently disengage from disrespect. If they're rude, change the subject or end the conversation. No drama, just quiet action. When your children sense that you're perfectly fine with or without their approval, something shifts. They realize respect isn't optional. It's the price of admission to your life. Bringing it all together. Let's recap all 6 strategies. Stop chasing their approval. Let them come to you. Set boundaries without guilt. Teach them how to treat you. Speak less. Listen more. Silence speaks louder than lectures. Drop the parenting tone. Talk to them like adults. Let consequences do the teaching. Experience is the best teacher. Anchor your worth in yourself. Respect starts with you. These aren't quick fixes. They're long-term shifts in how you show up in the relationship. Some children will respond immediately, others might test you first. But stick with it because respect grows where self-respect is planted. A final note. If you're thinking, but what if they never change? Then ask yourself, are you willing to keep sacrificing your peace for people who don't value it? You've raised them. You've loved them. Now it's time to love yourself enough to demand the respect you deserve. Want more? Subscribe for more tools to navigate family dynamics after 60. Comment below. Which strategy will you try first? Have you seen any of these work already? Like this video if it helped, it supports the channel. Remember, your best years aren't behind you, they're ahead, and they deserve to be filled with love, peace, and respect.